Kinnear here. Hope I find you well there because we have arrived at our Lessons of Lockdown feature for this Monday evening. It's where we hear how lockdown has changed the lives of one of you here in Wiltshire. And tonight's guest is a graphic designer, a visual storyteller, content creator, podcaster, and commercially creative businessman, jack of all trades. Gareth Robertson moved his whole business from the Midlands to Wiltshire during the pandemic and in between lockdowns last year. Now based in Salisbury, he joins us this evening to share his
Lessons of Lockdown.
So a very good evening to you, Gareth. How was the move south then from the Midlands to Wiltshire? Bit of a change.
Yes, good evening. Quite a change from North Birmingham to leafy Wiltshire. Definitely, it was quite a move. Yeah.
The view changed from concrete overnight to countryside.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying Wiltshire?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, from what we've seen of it, we've not really been able to get out and about and explore as much as we'd like because there's not been much open. And we had about a month after we moved. We moved at the end of August, and then at the end of September, the tier system sort of came in, and we had that lockdown light, the late summer lockdown that didn't really feel like a lockdown, but it was. And then the tier system kicked in, and then we had the whole run up to Christmas and all of that horribleness. So it's been a bit of a stop-start move, but we do like Salisbury. It's a very nice place, and we're looking forward to seeing more of it.
Man, it's been a long year. You know, when you talk through stuff like that and thinking back, whoa, It's been a very long year. So tell us about the Design Pit, your company. What is it that you do, Gareth?
Okay, so Design Pit is a graphic design business, graphic design and marketing. So I established the business in 2012, and that was in the North Birmingham region in a little city called Lichfield. It's where I grew up, and I set the business up there and developed it, grew it into a very small design studio. And at one point, I think we had 5 of us working there. Within the business, designers and office staff and so on and so forth. We do graphic design, so we work with businesses on marketing briefs. So it could be anything in the branding sphere. It could be direct mail campaigns. It could be literature design. We also do work in the digital space, so websites, mobile apps, social media content creation. Some deployment of that content as well over different social media channels. And we also do packaging design. Packaging design is something that I'm very passionate about and have been since I was a young designer starting out. And that's something I'm looking to probably do a lot more of in the coming months and years.
It's an extraordinary wide series of stuff that you do. How has the pandemic and the move to Wiltshire impacted on the business? Have you been able to grow it and keep going through the lockdowns and COVID?
Well, I actually restructured the business just before lockdown. Before the pandemic was even a thing. And I shifted the business to like a more of a collaboration model. We had a really tough time in the uncertainty around Brexit, and I needed to make some changes. So I'd started restructuring the business before COVID was a thing, and then we were sort of balancing things out, and it was all going quite nicely. It was at that point in time, sort of late 2019. It was for Design Pit. It was all about stability, maintaining our client base, and then COVID hit, and it was a real kick in the guts, really, because it was like, crikey, we've got this to deal with now. So, and I'm sure a lot of businesses felt like that. A lot of people did. What happened with Design Pit is we found certain areas of our business just literally switched off overnight. So a lot of the print stuff that we were doing, so any design for print just kind of stopped because people couldn't really deliver print and people weren't seeing each other. So there was no point really doing anything with like direct mail campaigns or brochure work or anything like that. But what happened with us is a lot of our clients shifted and moved onto digital platforms. So social media became a real thing for us, and we were doing a lot of social media content creation, deploying content. One of my clients has got a NHS contract, and they kept me very, very busy early on because they had a lot of stuff to talk about. So that was quite good for me. I've not stopped through lockdown. I'm very fortunate. I've worked all the way through, but I've certainly not set the world on fire in terms of turnover. It's been a struggle, but I've managed to keep going.
Yeah, and for that, as long as you can keep going, you're going to get somewhere. Thank you, Gareth. We're going to find out a little bit more about the kind of clients you work with, and also hear your lessons of lockdown, what you learned that you can share with us in about 10 minutes time. So stay right there. Gareth Robertson from the Design Pit is our Lessons of Lockdown guest this evening. More from him. Very lovely it is too. You're listening to BBC Radio Wiltshire, and we are now going to complete our conversation with this evening's Lessons of Lockdown guest. He is Gareth Robertson, a graphic designer, visual storyteller, content creator, podcaster, and commercially creative businessman. Does a lot of stuff well. He moved his whole business from the Midlands to Wiltshire during the pandemic last year, in between lockdowns. Now based in Salisbury, he's joined us this evening to share his
Lessons of Lockdown.
So you were telling us, Gareth, in our first chat, that social media and making little marketing films has been a huge boon for you during this pandemic and over the course of this year. What have been the clients who you've most enjoyed creating content and advertising for?
Well, I really like working with small to medium-sized enterprises because this allows you to sort of flex your creative muscles a bit more. I've had a career where I've worked with household names like Mars Bars, Maltesers, done some stuff with Pedigree, Chum, Caesar and Shiva. So, brands that, most people will know and will have come across. But when you're working with bigger brands, it can be quite restrictive in terms of what you're allowed to do. It's got to be a certain colour, got to be a certain font. You can't say this, you can't say that. So there's very strict brand guidelines to work through. So I do enjoy working with small to medium-sized businesses where you can be a bit bolder, a bit braver. I'm a big believer that small to medium-sized businesses, they are brilliant businesses, and every brilliant business deserves to have its story told. So that's where I enjoy working, in that sort of space. So I've done quite a lot of social media stuff for a couple of pharmacies during lockdown, an aesthetics pharmacy, and also an NHS pharmacy as well. Doing some really nice social media content for their Facebook and Instagram. Also running some MailChimp campaigns for them as well. So it's nice working in that space, definitely.
And I suppose, although it's quite restrictive working with the big names like Mars and Maltesers, at least it encourages the other guys to come to you, because you must be good if you work for them, right? That's the way the world works, isn't it? It
certainly does encourage a bit of confidence in you, and it builds a bit of credibility. So yes, it does help. And it's great.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the podcasts that you make, is that a new thing that you've got into as the pandemic's progressed, or have you always done podcasts?
No, podcasting is something that I'm quite new to, but we've done quite well with it so far. It is something I set up this year. I enjoy listening to them. I've interviewed for a couple of different podcasts, and I thought, I really enjoyed that, and I'd like to be on the other side of the microphone. So I set up Podpit in February, and I think I'm up to about 15 or 16 episodes now. You can get to that podcast on all of the sort of like regular channels, but it's on my website as well, which is designpit.co.uk/podcast. And there's loads.
What sort of stuff do you cover? Is it like a podcast for other businesses? Are you giving advice, or what is it?
it's quite simple. It's real stories from real people in real businesses. Again, going down the SME route again. Podcasts are always full of famous people who are uber successful, and although it can be quite inspirational listening to these people, it's not often very relatable. So I always think that people are good at what they do. They might not be known by everyone, they might not be famous, but they are passionate about what they do for a living, and that's what I really tap into. So it's very business focused. There's always a creative slant, but it's just real people talking about what they're good at and passionate about.
Okay, well, it's time now for you to talk us through your lessons of lockdown. You've had an interesting time over the last year, what with the move south from the Midlands to Wiltshire. So what would you say your lessons of lockdown have been that might just help the rest of us, inspire the rest of us?
Well, you'd be very pleased to know I've prepared for this bit because I knew this was a bit what you were wanting to focus on. So I've got 3 lessons of lockdown. I've got a work lesson, a family lesson, and a mental health lesson. So my work lesson is, even though the world's become more distant, we've also become more connected at the same time with the development of Zoom and Teams. So for me, I think you've got to think bigger, and the bigger you think, the better things will happen. You've got to be confident in your own ability. During the first lockdown in 2020, I actually secured my first bona fide international client. So I've done some work with a Spanish law firm. Before lockdown, I would never have thought to explore foreign markets to do design work for people. So by thinking bigger, great things happened.
Brilliant.
So that was a good start. And then family lessons. I have my little girl's 4. She spent a quarter of her little life in lockdown, which is a massive percentage of time. But what lockdown's allowed me to do is see more of her. So the lesson here for me is time's your most valuable asset. Spend as much of your time with your kids as you can, because you're never going to get these formative years back. And I think for me, that's probably the biggest lesson I've taken away from lockdown. And then number 3 is mental health. I know it's quite popular to talk about this at the moment in the current climate especially, but I've certainly become much more aware of my own mental health over the past year, and I've noticed some triggers that maybe I didn't notice before. And I think like most blokes, I've had some struggles in the past, and back then I maybe didn't quite understand what was happening to me, but having lived through those times, some as recent as 2019, and then through lockdown, I can identify and see when I'm mentally not quite right, and now I understand how I can react and put things in place to get back on track. So a big thing for me is talking more, surrounding myself and talking to good people in my life, both personally and professionally. Surrounding myself with people who bring the best out of me is really important. And one of the reasons why I started the podcast as well, actually. But I talk more and more, and it really helps. I think the lesson here is don't be afraid of mental instability. You've got to dig deep to recognise what your triggers are, and be comfortable talking to the people closest to you about how you're feeling.
Brilliant. Wise words. Gareth, thank you very, very much for being our Lessons of Lockdown guest tonight. I'm loving all of those lessons. Think bigger and the better it'll get. Make the most of the time with your kids when you've got it, and talk more. Talking's good. Loving those. Thank you very much. Gareth Robertson from the Design Pit in Salisbury. Glad you moved to our part of the world. You take care.
Thanks, Sue. Cheers.
BBC Radio Wiltshire.
Playing